Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes
Frazier! It's time! You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AtomCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. It is episode 125 of The Low Blow Radio on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and USCombatSports.com. After 2 weeks of a break, we're back. I'm Justin Goodrum, joined by Will McClary and Jorge Hernandez. What's up, guys?
Happy New Year.
Pretty good. What did you say? 125? Is that a milestone, guys?
Yeah, I think that's a milestone, man.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We're 125 years old. Joe Louis was 125 years old.
Unofficial. From what Fight Fans Radio kind of told us, we had to number our episodes, so I did my best to number them all. I think 125 is pretty accurate.
Well,
we've been around for 3 years, so we took. I mean, it would have been like 200 if we didn't take that break, a couple of years ago. So.
That's true. I mean, even Sugar Ray Leonard retired 3 times, so we'll be all right.
That's true. Today, we have a lot of local fights to talk about, so we'll discuss the latest concerning the Bellator card coming to New Mexico. A lot of local fighters on that. We'll recap Invicta FC, a lot of high notes, some low notes in terms of the stream. We'll break down Friday Night Fights, which is coming to Santa Fe, New Mexico. That will be premiering tomorrow. We'll break down all the fighters on there. And we'll preview, I guess, the funeral of Strikeforce, or a celebration on which way you want to look at it. And we'll also talk about some breaking news concerning Eddie Alvarez and 2 USC drug suspensions. As always, you can get in contact with the show through Twitter, to @TheLowBlow. Also through email to lowblow505@gmail.com. We are on the Fight Fans Radio Network along with the rest of their shows. You can get into contact with Fight Fans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream using the hashtag, I guess, Fight Fans Radio. We're supposed to have Jodie Esquibel today on the show. We're trying to work that out. If not, we'll probably try to have her on next week. In the meantime, we're just going to skip the 3 rounds. We've been off for the last couple of weeks. I'm sure these guys have a lot of burning issues they want to get off their chest. So without further ado, who wants to kick us off?
Well, I have to say, with bringing in the new year with Friday Night Fights, Jorge, you were absolutely right, man, about that Barthelemy and that Usmanee fight. I mean, all the fights were good, but man, are we going here again already with the judging right off the bat? So I hope that doesn't foreshadow this weekend's upcoming Friday Night Fight. Well, tomorrow's upcoming Friday Night Fights. What did you think about that fight, Usmanee and Barthelemy?
Personally, I thought Bartholomew, or the Cuban, I guess you can say, so we can separate it for folks so they know what was going on that night. But the Cuban in Miami, I thought may have won the early rounds, but, Usmanee from there on out, I think he controlled the fight. So I had it 8-4 for him, and I felt that he got robbed in I guess you can call Miami a Cuban city.
Right.
It's nothing discriminatory. It's nothing. I mean, they basically just went for the hometown guy, and it was unfortunate for this guy because he's a foreigner. They showed a story before that about, his upbringing, how he struggled. And then here he is, both undefeated fighters. And then for him to be screwed like that, man, it was just unbelievable. Did you think it was a flat out robbery or?
You know what? When you told me about it, it was real close. I mean, at first, you're right. Like in the beginning, Bartholomew, I was like, wow, this guy's jab is just impeccable long. He's got a, good hand speed. And I thought that, he was landing the most significant shots. But then Usmanee just started outworking him, like after round 7 to me. So, of course, on the points, I just saw him racking it up. And I had him up by 3 rounds. So, it wasn't the worst I've ever seen, but I definitely think if anything, it should have been a draw. And I forgive me for the name, but the undercard, the fight right before that, was it Gonzalez? He's an up and coming fighter that didn't make weight in his last appearance.
I think so. I didn't watch the fight, but I know what you're referring to. So
And I guess the point I want to make in terms of my complaint is even with Adrian Broner and this guy Gonzalez, these guys have not made weight, and they really just seem really nonchalant about it. Do you see like a significant difference in the old school fighters to this new generation? in terms of making the weight and the consequences that coincide with that?
I think so, because I mean, fighters back in the day, I mean, those guys had it rough. They would kill themselves. They would have a larger percentage taking out of their pot, or the other guy could easily say, all right, no fight. Now all these guys know is, what, I need this money. I can take a hit of a 20% purse. And I guess they feel that it's enough money, or they just need the work that bad that they don't care if they actually make the weight and lose that 20%. But you never know. A lot of these guys that are featured make maybe on Friday Night Fights maybe make what, $5,000-$10,000.
Yeah,
20% is a lot for someone who actually relies on that. But if they're that desperate, they need it at that time, then by all means, what the hell? I'm 3 pounds over. They're still going to let me fight. And especially with these with ESPN, they need these fights on TV for them to be able to have a product. So they're willing just to say, all right, screw it. Let the guy fight overweight, even if it wasn't in the contract. Take 20% of his purse. That way we still have a show at least. And, that was kind of sad. And it was Jonathan Gonzalez that you mentioned, and then Derek Ennis was the other guy who were right, actually in that bout. So I don't know, man. It was Ennis, excuse me. So it's just kind of disappointing, and in that robbery, it was pretty bad. I thought, like on a scale from 1 to 10, it was probably maybe an 8. Like you said, not the worst I've ever seen, but not the way to start off the year for boxing on national TV, man.
Oh, yeah. I was one more point just in terms of robberies. It kind of took me back a little bit. I don't know why it reminded me of Miguel Cotto against DeMarcus Corley. I think that was the last time I was really upset about a hometown stoppage. And it was just, it was clear they were going to give it to the Cuban, but at least it was a decent fight. At least we had that.
And I guess I'll go next. Just want to ask folks, please, if you're in the Santa Fe area, even if you're in Albuquerque, drive up to the Santa Fe fights, the ESPN Friday Night Fights at the Pueblo Pavilion. There's a pretty damn good main event with John Molina Jr., who just fought Antonio DeMarco in a championship fight not too long ago. Of course, John Molina did lose that fight with, the first minute, and he really didn't throw many punches. He just got caught by a straight hand that he never saw. So this guy is in it to win it. I asked him earlier at the weigh-ins. I was at the weigh-ins in Santa Fe. I asked him, how do you get motivated coming off of a championship fight on HBO to headlining on ESPN? He said, it's easy. I have a newborn. He's all, that's what I'm doing it for, and that's why I'm here. That's why I made weight. So definitely looking forward to that one. Young up-and-coming Brandon Gonzalez is on there. He's 16-0, and Dan Mouton. So no local guys on the main event, but the undercard is loaded with guys. And, I'll talk about that a little bit more later because we're going to get into that here in a bit.
I guess my thing, just real quickly, is the whole Eddie Alvarez situation, which we'll talk about more in depth. But I want to take the UFC side of it because, as you know, Eddie Alvarez is a free agent in the lightweight division. Basically, Bellator had an offer, UFC matched, and now I think Bellator matched that offer. But apparently there's a lawsuit going on, which we'll get into detail later. But my thing is just, you read the contract for Eddie Alvarez, which is $77,000 to show and $77,000 to win, I believe, plus somewhat of a intentional title shot for whatever that's worth. I mean, you compare that salary to Benson Henderson, who makes half that. You just got to wonder if you're angering some of the guys in your own promotion. I mean, here's Benson Henderson, who puts his body on the line all the time, who's super loyal, and he's not getting nearly the benefit of what Eddie Alvarez is getting. And considering Alvarez lost to Michael Chandler, I can see why a lot of the fighters in the lightweight division could be very angry. So I think, as we see some of these Bellator guys become free agents, I think their value might be a little bit overrated, in my opinion. But we'll get into that pretty later on. Speaking of Bellator, Jorge, you broke some news on SouthwestFightNews.com and on the Facebook page about Bellator stopping by Mean One MMA Gym this afternoon. And there's rumors that there'll be local fighters on the card. Do you know of how many local fighters on the card? And more importantly, will they appear on the main card on television?
On the main card on television, it's going to depend on how good their record is. They're still building that card up. I know, despite the fact that she signed with XFC, Angelica Chavez still wanted to be on that card. And they draw a big crowd there from the Chavez Dojo in the South Valley. They still got to find that one guy or girl that is going to bring a huge crowd. So the specifics of the card are still being made, and it's kind of scaring me a month and a half out that they don't exactly have too many matchups lined up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think on the main card, what they usually do is, you have your welterweight tournament finals is going to be on your main card plus the title fight. So that's 3 fights right there already taken up. So that leaves really only one open slot. It's 2 hours on the Spike time slot right after TNA Wrestling. If I just want to break this news real quick, I don't know if it's breaking news, but if you subscribe to the Santa Ana Star Center newsletter, you can get your tickets right now. The pre-sale ends in a couple of hours. You'll probably be over by the time we're taping this, but tickets go on sale tomorrow, January 11th at 10 a.m. If you were able to be on the Santa Ana Star Center mailing list, you got a pre-code that will enable you to get tickets earlier. So make sure you get these tickets. And like Jorge said, support the Santa Fe fighting event on ESPN and support this Bellator MMA event. I believe it's you, Jorge, that said, the more we support these events like Bellator, like ESPN, the more likely the UFC could take a look at running some fuel shows, some FX shows in these smaller venues in New Mexico. But if we're not supporting it, if we get a crowd like MMA Fight Pit, the UFC is not going to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Invicta. I know me and you, Jorge, we were kind of brawled over the stream of trying to order this thing. We tried. My internet went down. When it was up, the stream was down. So I was able to catch the last 3 fights once the stream went back up and once it was enabled to for everybody to get the Invicta stream for those who tried to order it. Before we break down the fights specifically, how much do you think was this a setback for Invicta? I mean, a lot of people were looking forward to buying this thing. It was only $8. I was going to put down money. You put down money, Jorge. People were looking forward to paying their money for a good product. And instead, even though Ustream, which is the site that provided the event, that hosted the stream for the event, their site went down because they couldn't handle how many people were requesting to order the pay-per-view. Invicta still takes the blame. So in your mind, does this tarnish Invicta to you? Was this just a blip on the radar? Technology, these things happen. Or could you see some backlash for the next Invicta event in April?
Well, people have gotten free shows from them. They've gotten a few shows from them for free. So I think they were willing to deal with it. It wasn't good that, the most anticipated of all the cards that they've had did have those, those glitches. But I believe, I believe it was 3 or 4 fights, correct me if I'm wrong, that were glitchy and didn't show up. I think it might hurt them just a little bit, but I think it's going to teach them, you better get these kinks out of the way. They may have not expected to have as many, as many people trying to buy it all at one time. So let's hope that maybe the next fights are free or they get all those kinks out of the way. But it was definitely not good for them the first time that they tried to do this. People were charged. I was refunded my money, and it wasn't. I had access to most of the fights. The Jodie Esquibel kind of cut out on me, but all the other ones were streaming okay for me. But it seemed like a good 80% of the people couldn't even see them. There were people at bars here, even locally, who didn't get to see it at all, just because it wasn't loading for them whatsoever.
So the bars here were showing it?
The bars, there was a bar here, I believe. Was it Elliot's, I believe? They were just streaming it, like someone hooked up an HDMI or something to a television.
Really?
And then they were streaming it. So hearing something like that is awesome. Obviously here locally, it'll be more, it'll make a lot more sense because of how big WMMA is here. So.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's just too bad that the stream went out because I think, that card was pretty decent, pretty good fights. On the main card, a lot of them went to decision, but they're pretty close and pretty competitive. I want to talk about first Jodie Esquibel's fight against Liz McCarthy. Very close fight. The stream, even the reposting of the link, which we have on our Facebook page, that has the full fight with Jodie Esquibel and Liz McCarthy. The fight was very close. The last minute or so was kind of cut off, so I don't know if you can get a true accurate representation if we really wanted to fight. For what I saw, I think Jodie won. The scores were 29-28, 28-29, 30-27. I know Jodie was in trouble in the third round. How did you score it, Jorge? And do you see this as a learning experience? She's just starting her foray into mixed martial arts. She's kind of trying to pull the Holly Holm thing, trying to do both sports at once. How do you think she did, and what do you think the future holds for her?
I think she came out very well. I mean, the first round, she was just bobbing or weaving. She looked like an amazing boxer. It looked like a boxing match. You didn't know because McCarthy wasn't going really for any real takedowns, and the ring generalship, if you will, that Esquibel demonstrated was just incredible. So I think if she just, she's pretty short as it is. A lot of those girls are around her height at that weight, though, at that atom weight. So it was just with Liz McCarthy, it's just someone who was a lot taller than her, and I think that gave her problems. I think not necessarily she struggled somewhat throughout the rounds. I scored it 29-28 in her favor. I thought 30-27 was not correct, as one judge actually scored it. But
clearly,
as long as she's able to defend a little bit better, defend that takedown a little more, or work on her jiu-jitsu a little bit better, I think she'll actually be okay, because we know, I don't think anyone else at that atom weight has the boxing experience that she does. If correct me if I'm wrong, Darren Invicta, just the experience that she has overall, world championship fight that she's actually been in as a boxer. I don't think there's anyone that might even be close to her boxing at that weight.
I just want to ask kind of a side question, and Will, you can jump in here too. With these weights, I heard a discussion on Lou Thomas from MMA Fighting, just answering different questions about MMA. He brought up, when you hear straw weight, when you hear atom weight, you kind of like, do you really take these weight classes seriously? To a casual audience, do you think, in the future, if, the UFC does include more women's divisions, do you see them taking, the straw weight title, the atom weight title, these other titles that are at these lesser weight classes with women seriously enough? I mean, we've never really gone this low in terms of weight classes with high profile fights. If you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, in boxing, has there been, the lower weight classes? I'm talking about 115, 105 that have gotten mainstream attention. I think these are the first fights I've seen that I've seen get major coverage from MMA media outlets that's been at the lower weight classes. Do you think a casual audience would take these fights seriously?
I mean, it depends in terms of some, it's a whole new type of networking that's going on now. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, in terms of like the Ultimate Fighter. I think if, it'd be interesting if they have, an Ultimate Fighter for females, and then I think those, whatever weight classes that would be featured on that show would definitely help the exposure. In terms of boxing, back in the day, absolutely. People were more than willing to engage throughout all the weight classes. But, to casual fans, it's always, what I normally hear is like, hey, man, boxing's dead, because they're just basically basing it on the heavyweights. But they're neglecting, you're talking about straw weights and flyweights. I mean, we're just starting to get, casual fans with the, exception of, like, of course, as always, Mayweather and Pacquiao, but, the welterweight and even the junior lightweight divisions. So I think I think that with the proper marketing, it's feasible. But, without that, I don't know.
On this card, Jorge, any fights that caught your eye? I know I was a big fan of the Alexis Davis, Shayna Baszler fight, and even Leslie Smith and Raquel Pennington. I know they had some kind of beef going into it before. And also Beck Hyatt's performance. She was a late replacement coming from Australia. She did pretty well against Carla Esparza, despite being short notice and despite the obviously wrestling advantage going to Esparza. Any other fights that impressed you?
Let's see. I mean, I only watched up to the fifth fight because I had to take off, and I haven't gone back to rewatch any of them. The Carla Esparza fight is the only one I actually did go back to see out of anything after the fifth fight. So just to go back to what I said earlier, it wasn't 4 fights that were interrupted. It was 5 fights. So I guess that is a lot. That's, pretty damn near 35% of the card. So I guess, I'd be pissed if I were everyone else, I guess. Maybe I'm not complaining because I got a pretty good stream. But the fight before with the other Jackson's fighter, Emily Kagan, versus Rose Namajunas, is that how you pronounce her last name?
That sounds right to me.
Okay, so
I'm reading it here. That looks right to me.
That was pretty incredible just because of the fact Emily Kagan showing that, the human arm can bend as far back as it actually did. I would have tapped to any of those, man. It just looked like anyone else would have been in excruciating pain the way Rose actually had her in some of those arm bars, and just the heart that Emily did show. she was only in her third fight as a professional. That was fun to watch to me. Just see someone actually hang in there. If you think about back, kind of like when you're impressed when someone doesn't, I guess, yield to a submission, is kind of like the GSP versus Dan Hardy.
I was going to mention
Dan
that.
Hardy got
Yep.
destroyed in that fight, but just
He did.
because of his will to win and his will not to give up, not being double jointed as he told us, it was pretty amazing, and people were just blown away by it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just really impressed before we move on by the jiu-jitsu of women in general. I think if you take a look at their jiu-jitsu game, I mean, people say the criticism of women's MMA is the striking, right? They don't have the power or the technique. But to me, if you make that criticism, which I disagree with, but if you do go that route, you have to say that the women have a significant advantage on the ground with their jiu-jitsu. Do you agree with that?
I definitely think so. Just because it just seems like that's what women, I guess, kind of lean to. I mean, Jodie Esquibel is kind of just complete opposite of that because she's actually coming from boxing. But I would completely agree with you, and it sure does seem like it.
Yeah, totally. Let's break down this ESPN Friday Night Fights card. I want to ask you both. If I'm just flicking the clicker here and I'm looking for an NBA game, and I land on Friday Night Fights on ESPN2 on a Friday night, which fighters should I care about? Which fight catches my eye to stay on a channel and not turn away? Why should I care about John Molina versus Danny Williams or any of the other fights on this card?
Well, I mean, especially because any of the other fights, the Dan Mouton fight and Brandon Gonzalez is a pretty good one, just because of the fact what it means for Gonzalez, a young up and coming prospect that'll actually be able to make a name for himself on a pretty big card. The guy's fighting out of the Pacific Northwest. Well, he was born in Portland and fighting out of Sacramento, so you have a couple of California guys on the main event, but definitely a pretty big fight for him. We got other guys like Archie Ray Marcus, who's looking to reestablish himself, and a few other names either making their debuts or trying to come up. But specifically, this is a very important fight for John Molina. Right now, he's ranked 13th on BoxRec. The guy who he lost to last time is Antonio DeMarco, who's ranked in the top 4. So that victory would have put him in the upper echelon of that lightweight class. So it's definitely something that we should be looking forward to just because of the prospects involved with this, whether it be John Molina and Danny Williams in the main event or, not necessarily Dan Mouton, but definitely Brandon Gonzalez in that co-main event. So very exciting to have it here. I don't know, Will, how do you feel about having it here near our hometown?
I think it's excellent, man. I'm also really interested in Molina, how he's gonna make his comeback. You know what I mean, in terms of getting, pretty much wiped out by DeMarco like that. But it's like kind of what you mentioned already. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't like he was just got cold, knocked out. He just wasn't responding to the punches. Like you said, he has this new motivation with his child now. So I'm just really interested in terms of how he's gonna bounce back. You know what I mean? We got Archie Ray, he's looking to bounce back too, get back in that limelight, and it's going to be taking place in Santa Fe. So that's going to be awesome in terms of all the local fighters that we've had here, Holly Holmes, Austin Trout, Carlos Condon. It just keeps bringing more to the state and lets us know that, we got a great stable of fighters, and hopefully we can get more mixed martial arts fights and boxing events in New Mexico.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Strikeforce. It is their last event officially. Depending on how you look at this could be a celebration or this can be, kind of a burying of a promotion. This takes place in Oklahoma City. God only knows why. I mean, Daniel Cormier, I believe he wrestled for either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, but there's really no connection to that city. I believe Oklahoma did have a event there promised to them, but it was canceled, so I think Strikeforce is making up for that. But you would think they'd have their last show in San Jose, which is the home of that organization. Before breaking down the fights, gentlemen, can you give us your memories of Strikeforce? Where does it hold a place in MMA history? I know, Will, you were a big fan of Strikeforce and how they put together their cards despite, not featuring, the best in the world compared to the UFC. But nevertheless, they always put on exciting fights. What stands out to you?
Man, for a while, my man KJ Noons, he really caught my attention in terms of, I'm more of a fan of the stand-up game. But, when I was casually starting to get into mixed martial arts, I mean, just every time that I tuned in to Strikeforce, of course, you're a little bit more hardcore so you know better than I in terms of where the true talent lies. But I was just always entertained. I mean, I know, if Erica's listening, she can't stand, Kung Lee. I see them kicking like that. I mean, just all the fights were just, they were great every time I tuned in. It's just, as the more we start, we've been discussing this for a while in terms of the different networks and in terms of who's really the champ. I think I really wasn't disgusted because as a casual fan, I was always excited, but at the same time, I was always interested in terms of the guys from Strikeforce, how they would do in the UFC. So I mean, it is bittersweet. We get a more who's the best of the best, but I really enjoyed Strikeforce as long as it lasted. So I am a little sad to see it go. I guess it's just these guys, in terms of since they weren't in the UFC, it seemed like they would always go the extra mile to get that exposure.
And one fight that stands out to me is the Gilbert Melendez versus Josh Thompson fight, which was one of their last events there in May. That was a war, and I'd love to see that fight. It was a controversial decision, but still, man, that was an incredible fight. Also, Cyborg versus Nick Diaz. Again, I think I said it before. It actually saved my night. It was the same night Devin Alexander, Timothy Bradley fought. So thank God for that fight. Or my friends who came over to watch Timothy Bradley and Devin Alexander would have been pissed. But I mean, it had its wars. It brought up some names. Daniel Cormier, Gilbert Melendez. It gave Nick Diaz another alternative other than the UFC to actually compete in. So whether people, however they feel about Strikeforce, it was good for the sport at the time it was around. And now, I guess, these individuals, if you'd like to put it this way, they graduated. All right, let's merge this thing. This may be, I don't know is it the equivalent of the AFL and the NFL merging, if you will, the way it was back maybe early 70s or late 60s, whatever it was. I'm not a football historian, but the way it was for football, I guess. Do you guys feel like this is the equivalent of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way of putting it. You can go the NBA route too, ABA, NBA. I would have to say with Strikeforce, they're the only American promotion to have more than one division that was relevant in terms of top 10 fighters. I mean, you take a look at their heavyweight tournament, lots of top 10 talent there. Light heavyweight at the time, certainly getting Dan Henderson. King Mo was in the top 10. Fei Zhao, Cavalcante in the top 10. Middleweight, very strong division. Tim Kennedy, Luke Rockhold, Jacare. Take a look at even, Jake Shields certainly was there. Even with welterweight, they had Jason Mayhem Miller. You have, of course, let's see, they had Nate Marquardt. They have, what's his name, Tyron Woodley. I mean, they had tons of guys that had certainly potential to break into the top 10. I just think the problem was that their shows were so infrequent that worked for them and against them. So I think my favorite fight has to be, the grudge matches. I always like, two guys not really liking each other. Certainly Kung Lee, Frank Shamrock versus Phil Baroni. Those fights were awesome. The triangle from Verdun, triangling Fedor. And, of course, the women's action, Ronda Rousey to, Cyborg, Gina Carano. Certainly, I think Strikeforce is a lot to be proud of. I think once Zuffa bought it, the promotion was dead. It was toast immediately. Let's just keep it real. But overall, I think their legacy is a good one. I think Scott Coker should pat himself on the back and be proud of himself. I just wish he got a better investors to kind of see it out all the way. I think their investors kind of bailed and led to the beginning of the end. Nevertheless, I think we all agree that Strikeforce will always be remembered as a great promotion in MMA compared to, Affliction, IFL, and so on. I'm going to turn to these fights, guys, just real quick. Not the best matchups. You got a lot of names on here. Certainly, if you take a look at, even fights, you're not going to find them on this card. Is there any fight that stands out to you as the closest fight? I know Daniel Cormier he's facing Dion Sterling. Starling, excuse me. He was a 20-1 favorite at one point.
My
I don't
God.
know if those odds have gone down.
That has to be a record.
That's outrageous, but nevertheless, is there any fights that catches your eyes, or is this just an exhibition card for, you know, the guys going to the UFC, to kind of put on a show before it closes down?
I think the Ed Herman Jacare Souza fight, just because of the fact we're seeing a rejuvenated Souza, I think, since his loss to Luke Rockhold. He looked incredible against Derek Brunson, having being able to KO him. And, the guy, that was his only KO of his, so far the only KO of his career. He's 16-3, and that is his first knockout. So I'm interested in seeing that fight and how, Ed Herman has prepared for Jacare now that he presented, I guess, a stand-up game or a punch that we've never seen before. So that's one fight that actually sticks out for me. Let me see if there are any other ones. There's not too many just because I think they're pretty much one-sided. Besides the Nate Marquardt, Derek Savadini fight, that might be it. I think all the other ones are one-sided. Maybe the Josh Barnett fight, man. Mm-hmm. But besides that, that's pretty much it. And maybe the Tim Kennedy, Trevor Smith. Tim Kennedy always reminds me of like an old social studies teacher. I like seeing a fight.
Him and Rich Franklin, the teachers, man. But Tim Kennedy, he's kind of could take the place of Brian Stann. He's a I think he's a Marine, or he was in the Army and military for sure. He certainly has the same characteristics as Brian Stann, so that's not going to hurt their cause in terms of the military. Let's talk about this Eddie Alvarez situation. It seems like Bellator and UFC, it seems like this is the first major quarrel or argument over the fighter that we've seen between these two organizations. Eddie Alvarez is a free agent. What I understand is Bellator let Eddie Alvarez see what other options are available to him. Certainly with Eddie, with him, basically, he tried to see what UFC offered. They offered him $70,000, to correct myself, to show, 70 to win. Bellator, they claimed they matched the offer. Basically, they took the name off the UFC and put a Bellator name on it to match it. And it would have given him a $250,000 signing bonus, just like the UFC offered him. But Eddie Alvarez claims those numbers don't match up. And he claims that, there's future money and pay-per-view bonuses, all kinds of different stuff. And now there's a legal situation in which Eddie Alvarez has claimed that Bellator has sued him. Now, we don't know the terms of the lawsuit, but nevertheless, there is a lawsuit according to Eddie Alvarez. He was on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani. He seemed very disgruntled, very kind of unhappy about his situation, not only because he can't fight, but also because, when he was in Bellator, some things rubbed him the wrong way that kind of increased his desire to leave. In your mind, how important is this for Bellator to keep Eddie, and with this, pending rumored lawsuit that we don't really know the details of, do you think they'll keep him?
I think it's pretty. For Bellator, for them to remain, I guess, a credible organization, I think they need Eddie Alvarez. Like you've said before, the UFC doesn't need him. Bellator needs him more than the UFC needs him, just to stay alive as a promotion. It doesn't seem like Bellator is dying by any sense, but they do need one of those names that does stand out there. And I think this bidding war, if you will, between the two organizations is giving him more of a name, and it's kind of helping Bellator more by getting their name out there. This competition, or this organization, this promotion that dare challenges the king that is the UFC. But these bidding wars, it's something we've seen before. We've seen it with boxing. Manny Pacquiao was one of the huge names that was in a bidding war. Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy, had a huge issue with Top Rank over that. Recently, Yorkis Gamboa was another guy, just because of this whole, money team / 50 Cent Promotions, whatever he's exactly running. So it's something that we see consistently, and I think basically this is just benefiting Eddie. Unless obviously he gets sued. Alvarez is in a pretty good position where his name's getting out there a lot more, and who knows, maybe get more sponsorship. So it's all benefiting him, I think, and
let's hope
Bellator
so
as well.
Mm-hmm. Just to shift gears, Will, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of somewhat boxing news, and really is related to MMA. The first has to be concerning the story that broke within the last week or so. I was only made aware of this today, but with Tyson Fury, heavyweight boxer who's 20-0, apparently challenged Cain Velasquez, the heavyweight champion of the UFC, to a fight, I guess either in a boxing ring or the octagon. Velasquez then responded to Fury on ESPN.com. This is Cain Velasquez's comments, quote, "I'm not a boxer. I'm a mixed martial artist. If he wants to fight, he can go into the UFC and work his way up like everybody else does. Nothing is given to you in this world. To me, it's like I don't talk about it. I go ahead and do it. That's all I have to say about that," unquote. And that was via Cain Velasquez. What do you think about this? Is this a publicity stunt by Tyson Fury? What's he thinking here?
Absolutely, man. I mean, what was that? What was that show with like the average Joes would go up against the athletes?
Oh, Pro versus
Pro
Joe.
versus Joe. I'd rather watch
Yeah.
that. It's just a publicity stunt. I mean, that just shows how bad that again the heavyweight division is. It has to do a crossover in terms of to get some real exposure. I mean, you just don't see that in any other sports. I mean, of course, combat sports is unlike any other sports. I mean, you don't play fighting. You know, it's for real. But you know, nevertheless, I still remain. I don't care if it's the superstars such as like Anderson Silva. You know, when he was discussing fighting Roy Jones, it's just more. These fighters just don't realize it's just a circus event. I don't think any real fans or would ever really take this seriously. It's two different type of fighting forms, and it just makes no sense. It's just detrimental to the character. Instead of concentrating on trying to switch over and fight a mixed martial artist heavyweight champion, improve your own craft and beat a freaking Klitschko and then get back at him.
Another, I guess, crazy MMA boxing stories. Apparently, King Mo Lawal, he signed to a double contract with Bellator and Impact Wrestling. Apparently, he wants to go for the trifecta and try boxing. Apparently, he wants to fight Kimbo Slice. He claims he has a boxing clause in his contract. Any interest in this freak show with Kimbo Slice and King Mo? I think Kimbo, he's 4-0? I don't know. Nevertheless, King Mo is just, before he's even wrestled an official match in TNA or has even fought in a Bellator cage, here he is trying to challenge Kimbo Slice. Any feelings of caring about this at all?
That again be a no. I mean, Kimbo Slice is gonna be. I think he's still scheduled to fight Roy Jones, but again, we saw, he was an internet sensation, very entertaining on the internet. But we saw what happened when he went to the UFC. I mean, he's a tough guy. He did decent, but definitely exposed the difference between an internet sensation and elite fighters. And I never seen nothing like like Bo Jackson crossing over being hugely successful in both arenas. I mean, if we go back to Manny Pacquiao and Oscar De La Hoya, their fans were getting mad just because they were singing on the side. I think the guys to really get the type of exposure or they really want the respect, you just have to stay dedicated to one sport. I mean, I think we might see it in the future. We were just talking about Jodie, the good, boxing hand skills. I remember KJ Noons, he said if he couldn't make it in mixed martial arts, he was going to go to boxing. But it's like either or. I mean, I think that would be pretty amazing if you had an individual. I think they probably will come along as, mixed martial arts continues to get its popularity. But I think we're going to get that individual who can really master both sports. But I don't think there's anybody nowhere near right now in our day and age that's capable of really doing this right now. And then you're trying to do the wrestling as well. I mean, I'm sorry. Of course, the injuries to wrestling and the dedication and the hard work is very real, but the outcome is still fake. So I just, make up your mind, choose a sport, go with that. Other than that, it just pretty much reminds me of Rocky III and Hulk Hogan.
That's going to pretty much wrap up this portion of two things real quickly. Rusmar Polares and Joy Beltran tested positive during their trips overseas. They're gone, I believe, for 9 months. That's via the UFC drug testing policy. And Invicta 5 will feature Jackson's fighter Michelle Watterson taking on Jessica Penne for the 105-pound title sometime in April in Invicta 5. Right now, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have Jodie Esquibel for an interview. Stay tuned.
We're back on the low blow. Joining us now is Jodie Esquibel. Jodie was involved in in a fight of sorts with Liz McCarthy at Invicta FC 4. How you doing, Jodie?
I am doing amazing. Thanks for asking. How are you guys?
Excellent.
Doing well.
Good.
Now, you wanted split decision victory. Were you worried a little bit when it went to the judges' cards and you heard that it was a split decision?
You know what? I knew there was parts of maybe the second round and definitely parts of the end of the third round that I had lost, but I felt like I had dominated the fight, so I wasn't completely worried about the decision. When it was a split decision, you always get nervous when you leave it up to the judges, but I felt confident in my performance, and I'm glad that the decision went the right way.
In that third round, it seems like you're defending the submission there. What was going through your mind being in that vulnerable position to be almost submitted? Were you thinking you survived the round? Were you thinking you may be able to sweep her? What was going through your mind in that third round?
In the third round, I knew that she's great. She's great off her back. She's great on the ground. She submitted a lot of people in her amateur fights. So I was aware of that the whole time. When I found myself in a bad situation, I knew that I had to keep calm with her. I felt that I was defending the choke well. I didn't ever feel like I was in a lot of trouble. When I felt like I was in more trouble is when I thought that I was going to actually try to move from her taking my back. She was kind of trying to almost isolate my arm, and I know she's really good and extremely dangerous. I felt like I was more comfortable defending the choke than I was defending the unknown with her. So I almost felt more comfortable defending from where I was at than trying to get out of the position. I knew I was in short time, and I knew she was real dangerous. So I kind of picked the battle that I was defending where I was at, defending the known versus the unknown with her.
Jodie, did it surprise you that your boxing was so effective? I mean, it was an exciting fight, but that first round was just so, you controlled it with your cage generalship. It was just incredible. I mean, I thought I was watching a boxing match of how easily you were able to outstrike her, and your movement was very impressive. So did it surprise you that your boxing was that effective early on?
We definitely had a game plan for this fight, and I knew that she was extremely aggressive. No surprises at all, and she was super tough, and she was extremely game the whole fight. I knew that I had to stick to my game plan. I felt good with my hands. I felt good establishing the jab, and I knew that I couldn't let her bully me around. And so that's why I felt like I had to establish myself early on, and I felt like I did that in the first round.
Jodie, a lot of people know you are a two-sport athlete, both on mixed martial arts and boxing. What's next for you? Do you see kind of doing one sport than the other, or being committed to MMA for a couple of fights? What's in your future?
I want to stay as busy as I possibly can, whether it be boxing or MMA. Whatever comes first. I would love to be on the next Invicta card if I could. Now's the time. I feel like I have a good momentum. I feel like my learning curve is so high right now, and I'm learning so much every single day. I'm already back in the gym getting better, and I would love to be able to get on that next Invicta card. If not, if it's a boxing match that comes up or something else, then I want to have a great year and I want to stay busy. So whatever comes first.
So, Jodie, who's your favorite fighter, male and female?
Oh, man. What's crazy is coming from a team of amazing fighters, male and female. We have pound for pound the best female boxer in the world with Holly Holm, and she's been my idol since I was 14, so I look up to her a lot as a fighter and as a person in general. But we have a whole team full of people that I look up to every single day that I'm able to train with. We have Clay is getting ready for a fight, and Cub Swanson, and all the guys that are here every day, and I'm able to learn from them. I just look up to my team. I know that's a cop out answer, but it's hard to pick.
And that was good. We were discussing your boxing skills, because I'm more on the boxing side. I really appreciate the stand-up game. I saw that you had a little bit of a peekaboo style there too. You popped up in a lot of those fights in the fight, like how Tyson did, and you was connecting really good. How did it feel when you were connecting against your opponent? Did you feel like you were damaging her with your shots?
Man, you know what? That's cool that you say that because Tyson I'm obviously a shorter fighter and trying to pick up any kind of style with those looping hooks or any of those inside boxing hooks or that peekaboo style is so exciting for me, and I really feel like if I could just capitalize on that a little bit more in my style, I would be able to. I know I landed some good shots. It felt good because it feels safe when I'm throwing them like that, with that peekaboo style, and that's fun. It's just a fun style, and it's so cool to learn new things, you know. And so I hope I can adapt that more into boxing and MMA.
And also, I was going to bring up that gym, the Jackson's MMA. You know, there's a certain gym in Northern California that thinks they're the premier women's MMA gym. But to be honest, I don't think it's close when it comes to Jackson and comparing other women's camps. How about you?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have Julie Kedsing, nonetheless. I mean, she's one of the best women's fighter in the world. You know, we have pound for pound the best boxer in the world. Michelle Watterson's fighting for the 105 Invicta title. You know, we have Emily, we have Norma Center, it's just, we're pretty deep in the talent, and, you know, there's a lot of girls out there, and there's gyms out there that I have females, you know, that just the dynamic of our gym is extremely hard to find, and we're all high level, and I'm extremely blessed to be even in company with these girls, you know.
Hey, Jodie, we have one more question, then we'll let you go. As you probably know, the UFC is adding a women's division. Just overall, with Ronda Rousey's success, do you think it's possible now that the UFC could add more women's division? Do you see it a possible future inside the octagon? Do you see it as a foreseeable goal in the future?
You know what? Right now, it's such an exciting, crazy time for women's MMA. I think that with the division being added to the UFC is a step in the right direction. You know, I think that we have to, as women, continue to promote ourselves as athletes that are in their training just as hard as the guys are, you know, and we're at a pivotal point to where, you know, Invicta is putting themselves on the map of all female cards, and I think it's just an exciting time. If we keep moving in the right direction, you know, the sky's the limit for us.
Great. Well, Jodie, thank you very much for joining us. Anything you want to plug? Your Twitter, Facebook, any fights coming up?
I think this year, 2013 is going to be a busy year. You know, I'm looking to hopefully fight on the next Invicta card, if not the one after that. Just thank you, everybody, to my team. I have the best team in the world, the best coaches, Mike Winkle, John Brandon Gibson, Greg Jackson, my strength and conditioning coach, Turning Point. Everybody that's helped me, you know, and hopefully it's a super busy year, and I hope to be learning a lot and keep a lookout for me, you know. I'm here to stay, so.
Awesome, Maura. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jodie. Good luck.
Thank you, guys.